Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Simone Collins. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm the Director of Outreach for UHS Mental Health Services. I'll be moderating our session today entitled Go the Bleep to Sleep. Thank you for attending the inaugural Mental Health and Wellbeing Summit. We're offering workshops and activities for students to take a break and take care of their mental and physical health. Before we continue, I invite us to take a moment to reflect on the land on which we currently reside. If you're in Madison, as I am, we are guests on the ancestral home of the Ho-Chunk Nation. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Dejope since time immemorial. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. I want to thank Professional Interpreting Enterprise for providing interpretation and captioning, and the Wisconsin Union Campus Event Services for producing this event. The closed captioning button will appear in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. For this session, we'll be using the Q&A function, so if you have any questions for our presenters, please feel free to post them in the Q&A. Now I'd like to take a moment to introduce our session leader and speakers, which are Danielle Okisanja and James Gresh. So I'm going to hand it over to them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Okisanja. I use she, her pronouns.
My name is James Gresh. I go by he, him, his pronouns. I'm one of the interns here.
Okay, and so I will share my screen. And can everyone see that okay? Our presentation this afternoon is Go to the Bleep to Sleep. And so our objectives for this presentation are it's not moving along for me, sorry. Here we go. The objectives for this presentation are learning the negative impacts of poor sleep, explore how sleep function works, discern between helpful and unhelpful coping skills for managing sleep or improving sleep, and enjoy a little bedtime story by Samuel Jackson, which will include the bleep part. So just as a heads up.
So I think it's important to talk a little bit about what happens maybe when our sleep does go bad. And we'll kind of get to some of the health implications of that. I'm going to move to the next slide, I guess.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So what are some of the risks to our health, when our sleep goes bad or isn't maybe where we would like it to be? So there's obviously some mental health impacts of poor sleep. So things like irritability, cognitive impairment, memory lapses or loss of memory, impaired moral judgment, and then maybe more on the severe side, things like hallucinations, and then symptoms that are similar to ADHD. So maybe like some inattention or difficulty with concentration, things like that. It can also have physiological impacts, things like impaired immune system functioning, risk of diabetes type 2. There's some variation in heart rate, which can also increase risk of heart disease, impacts on like the muscles. So things like decreased reaction time, tremors, aches. And then it can also have other impacts such as growth suppression, risk of obesity, and then decreased body temperature. So I think maybe something that's important to many of us is like, how does this impact our performance? I know I mentioned the fact that symptoms of symptoms that are similar to ADHD can show up when we have impaired sleep. And so obviously a big part of sleep is that it allows us to consolidate our memories. It kind of allows us to be more efficient with our memory recall. So individuals who are sleep deprived were actually less efficient in being able to recall memories And so this even at a factor of like 19%. So so people who don't sleep the previous night have 50% less memory ability. So obviously there's a large impact on our ability to perform the way maybe we would like to. Sleep can allow us to, for our memory tasks to be completed with less mistakes, a little bit less anxiety and less stress. And so I think a belief that we often maybe hold is that if we sacrifice sleep, that we'll get better performance, which is clearly not supported by the research.
Yeah, so why is sleep hard? Some of the common challenges to sleep for college students are listed here. Stress is a huge component, so worrying about an exam or project and not being able just to fall asleep, along with like our assignments and stuff like that. Poor time management, so staying up later to complete an assignment or study. Technology in the bedroom also. So there's been some studies that show that like looking at your phone or your computer before sleep can stimulate our alertness. And so that can like combat sleep. And so, yeah, technology can be an issue there. Noisy environments, roommates, academic pressure. So like, oh, if I go to sleep now, I'll wake up super early and then I'll do this X, Y, and Z. And you can see some of the other things listed there that we'll talk a little bit more about later in the presentation. So we'll start out by saying, how does sleep work? So there's no like clear consensus, but there's kind of a blend of theories. And some of these things James actually mentioned already. So one belief is that is to help our consolidate our memories and mental function. So brain plasticity, neural pruning, strengthening, what have you. Also, sleep is for regeneration and is the time where muscle growth happens, tissue repair, protein synthesis. So it's when our bodies recharge and repair. And then also energy conservation. So we spend less energy during that time. So we're able to do those other biological functions while we sleep.
So what are some of the stages of sleep? So there are kind of 4 stages plus this last kind of stage, the REM sleep. So stage 1 is kind of that light sleep. People are easily awakened at this point, slow eye movements, decreased muscle movement. Then there's kind of stage 2, eye movement stops, brain waves are kind of slow, and there's body temperature and heart rate are slowing down. Stage 3 is where our kind of brain waves are interspersed. Slow brain waves are interspersed with smaller, faster waves. And this is where kind of we transition from a more light to a more deep sleep. And then when we get to the deep sleep, there's no eye movement or muscle activity, and it's difficult to wake the person that's asleep. REM sleep is kind of this where dreams occur, muscles are paralyzed, and brain activity is similar to that of consciousness. And we'll talk a little bit about maybe the importance of kind of these different stages. So here's kind of just a visualization. So you can kind of see some of the of kind of what I was describing with kind of the more rapid brain waves versus kind of the more interspersed kind of brain waves. And you can kind of see the different stages as it progresses, and then kind of REM sleep right there at the end. That's kind of one of the most important stages.
So there are several systems or 2 systems that kind of help us sleep. So I'll speak about one of them, our body clock or circadian clock. So you may be familiar with this, like circadian rhythms, what have you. So basically it's an internal system that controls the timing of our body, some of our body functions, so wakefulness and sleepiness. And then it's responsible for a lot of functions outside of sleep as well. So like when hormones are released, body temperature, when we feel most energized. And so it's an imperfect system, and a few examples of like when our body clock can go wrong, or compared to like a wall clock, is like jet lag. So if you're traveling abroad, your body clock feels it's one time and then the physical time is another. So this can cause things like difficulty sleeping, fatigue, mental fog, poor concentration, irritability, mood changes. So many of the symptoms that are associated with insomnia. Another example of our like body clock not matching the wall clock is like shift work disorder. So if you're working third shift and you need to be alert at like 4 a.m., which is atypical for our bodies. And so setting the body clock. So what triggers us to like wake in the morning and feel sleepy at night? One of the systems is exposure to sunlight. So when we see sunlight with our eyes, that triggers something in our brain that says like, hey, we're going to be alert. So earlier exposure to sunlight in the day kind of sets the clock for an earlier bedtime. But if you like have exposure to light later in the day, you're gonna have a later bedtime. So that kind of brings up that point with like technology. So like looking at your phone, you're exposed to light. This is kind of similar to sunlight, and that's gonna like trigger like, oh, I should be up now. Another component that kind of sets the clock is consistent wake times and bedtime. So standardizing your own clock to a wall clock, basically. So I go to bed at like 10:30, I wake up at 8. And so having a set pattern helps us like be consistent with our sleep. And our body will naturally feel sleepy when it's time to go to sleep because we've created that routine. And then also regularities in other parts of our routine. So as I mentioned, our body clock is responsible for other body functions, so like digestion, eating. And so setting our other activities, so they're pretty standard. So outside of waking and sleeping, we also have like benchmarks to know as we're getting closer to sleep, so training our bodies. Body temperature. So our body temperature peaks in the early evening and then falls as we get ready to sleep. So also another way to set our clock is kind of like having a cooler temperature when we are about to go to sleep. Many people like say like, oh, it's really difficult to sleep when it's hot. Is a biological reason behind that. Yeah.
There's this other component that is the sleep drive. And so this is kind of the second system that aids in triggering fatigue and sleepiness. Sleep drive is kind of the amount of pressure that we feel to go to sleep that our body's kind of naturally producing throughout the day. And so it's based largely on how active and alert we are in a 24-hour period. So the stronger the drive, the faster it is for us to fall asleep. So obviously, the more drive to fall asleep, the easier it is to fall asleep, and the more like deep sleep will produce. So the system, and kind of when I say system, I mean our body is self-regulating. So when we experience a night that's maybe poorer in sleep, the body will kind of adjust and actually increase our sleep drive to kind of make up for the lost sleep the previous night. So our body will kind of try to naturally regulate like our need for sleep. We can go to the next slide, and it kind of just shows, this is kind of a visual representation of that sleep drive, kind of as we wake up early in the morning, and it kind of starts out pretty low sleep drive, and then obviously as we progress through the day, that sleep drive goes up, and we kind of become more sleepy, and it's easier to fall asleep.
And so with the two systems, our circadian clock and sleep drive, their like interaction helps us fall asleep and wake up. So as James mentioned, throughout the day, our sleep drive increases. But as we get closer to like bedtime, our alertness decreases. So basically sleep wins. But as we go through the night, sleep drive reduces, our body clock starts to send signals to increase alertness, and then we're awake. So it's kind of the coordination between the two systems. So And we'll talk more about how we can optimize sleep by like kind of optimizing those two interactions.
So it's kind of important to wonder, like, maybe what might be getting in the way of kind of that sleep process and kind of that natural, alertness kind of system, and then kind of sleep drive system. So there are certain behaviors that can interfere with sleep. So if we're trying to go to bed too early, if we're staying in bed when we can't sleep for, let's say you try to go to bed at a certain time and you're just kind of laying there awake the whole time, whether there's kind of like self-medicating or kind of commanding yourself to fall asleep, those things can actually have some impact on that. And we'll try to kind of touch on each of those things. But I think it's important to recognize there's kind of this paradox where good sleep occurs in the absence of trying to force ourselves to fall asleep. I think in many ways this is because as we're trying to force ourselves to fall asleep, there's kind of this alertness that is part of encouraging that sleepfulness. And so actually we're increasing some of that alertness while attempting to increase the sleep drive, which is not necessarily how we want to kind of go about that. So here it's kind of, what do good sleepers think about, which is kind of nothing. They're kind of is kind of disconnected from maybe some of that kind of that pressure to try to fall asleep coming from ourselves. So some mistaken assumptions about sleep can actually impact the way we kind of are able to fall asleep. And so some examples that are provided here are like, I need to sleep to function tomorrow, or I haven't slept in all night, or I must feel this way because I didn't sleep well. And so I think the way that can impact us is actually by kind of impacting this paradox that I kind of mentioned earlier, which is that these thoughts can actually increase our desire or pressure to put on like trying to get to sleep, which actually then obviously works counterintuitively and actually makes it harder for us to fall asleep. So those are some things that, maybe we can move to the next one and I'll touch on those. So some thoughts and emotions can interfere with our sleep. And I think I kind of touched on this a little bit, but so there's kind of this quote about Pavlov's dogs. And so this is actually getting to the comment about laying in bed and expecting yourself to kind of fall asleep and kind of laying there for a long period of time. So if we're doing things in bed that are kind of like like we're trying to fall asleep, or we're kind of laying there awake, or we're on our phone and kind of doing these other things, then we're actually kind of combining the stimulus of being in bed with alertness or activities that are kind of more alertness. So we want our bed to be about falling asleep. And so kind of keeping that boundary between some of those things. So there's a quote here, ruffled mind makes a restless pillow. So in many ways, I think this is getting kind of to some of the point of how anxiety or kind of that alertness and can also make it hard to get to sleep. So I think these other pieces that are on here as well kind of get to some of the things that Danielle touched on. So inconsistency in our sleep cycle or sleep schedule can obviously throw off that body clock. And so consistency is really helpful for our body recognizing a time when we need to get up and a time when we need to fall asleep. Some additional pieces are substances. So things like caffeine actually blocks the sleep drive signal. So if we're using caffeine later in the day, then we are actually decreasing our sleep drive. And also like certain amounts of caffeine can also decrease sleep drive. Alcohol also leads to more shallow and disrupted sleep. So while it may help us fall asleep sometimes, people sometimes use alcohol to fall asleep, it's actually interfering with kind of the other parts of the process that we talked about earlier, things like how restful the sleep is, like are we really getting into the stages of sleep that are more restful and have a better, more productive process for us. And this final one, which I think maybe is a bit of a downer for a lot of people, but is that the final culprit is naps. So, as our sleep drive is building up, we take this nap and maybe in the middle of the day, now we've decreased our sleep drive. And so then our sleep drive has to rebuild up. during the rest of the day. And then unfortunately, it becomes a lot harder to fall asleep. And I know a lot of people will kind of incorporate naps into their routine. So I hate to be a bit of a bummer, but yeah.
And so as James was mentioning, some of the culprits that we use to help us sleep actually will cause other sleep problems. So when sleep solutions become sleep problems. So one of the substances is alcohol. So as James mentioned, a lot of people assume that alcohol will help them sleep because yeah, you feel drowsy if you drink to excess. And 20% of Americans have used alcohol to help them fall asleep. Alcohol is a depressant, so yeah, it can result in feelings of drowsiness. However, it's not the same quality sleep. On a previous slide, we showed like delta brain waves. That's a component of the third and fourth stage of sleep. And so when you drink alcohol, you're triggering alpha waves that are like similar waves to like when you're resting or meditating. So it's not like sleep, but it's restful. And so those waves compete. And so you're not getting the actual brain waves that you need for like restful sleep. Also, alcohol interrupts the circadian rhythm or body clock, resulting in us waking up more often through the night. Along with that, sometimes there's additional bathroom trips caused by drinking. And I think in an earlier slide, James mentioned too that alcohol or our muscles get relaxed when we're asleep, but alcohol can like increase that, and so we can have things like snoring and sleep apnea occur while we're asleep. And then lastly too, alcohol can block REM sleep, which is the most restorative form of sleep, as James mentioned earlier. And then here's just a little graphic, shows like a normal night of sleep. And then you can see that you're suppressing the REM sleep. So you're just getting deep sleep, but not that next stage afterward, which is necessary.
So then we also have caffeine, which is another substance that's often used. And so 43% of Americans kind of report that they're very likely to use caffeinated beverages to combat daytime sleepiness. So it's a really common way that many of us try to stay alert and try to stay focused. And so caffeine is a stimulant and it can increase alertness. But it also blocks kind of sleep-inducing chemicals in the brain. It can increase adrenaline production, and then when we use caffeine, it's actually pretty quick. The effects are pretty immediate, so they can start within 15 minutes for a pretty long period of time. So it's kind of saying that it's about 6 hours. So people can experience like more alertness for kind of longer periods of time. And so obviously it's important to recognize like what's maybe a good amount of caffeine intake. So individuals can also experience physical dependence on caffeine. So things like withdrawal symptoms that can cause things like headaches, fatigue, and muscle pain. And so then I think as maybe a reference point, because I think caffeine consumption is actually pretty common. And I think for many of us, we maybe drink coffee or have our energy drinks. So it's important to maybe recognize what's more moderate versus excessive kind of caffeine intake. So moderate would be like 3 8-ounce cups of coffee. And so for anybody that's also using like energy drinks, that's about 250 milligrams of caffeine. And then excessive is like 6 or more 8-ounce cups of coffee. And then on the next slide, we'll kind of show you a little bit how caffeine kind of changes our sleep patterns as well. So yeah, similar to the chart that Danielle showed about alcohol and sleep, you can kind of see how there's a pretty significant difference between these 2 nights, one kind of this more normal night and then one with a lot more kind of wakefulness, as you can see. So there's not really that deep sleep and you're kind of falling asleep, but it's not as, it's just not, the quality is not as good as you would get if you were not using caffeine.
And so we'll talk now about improving sleep. So one way to improve sleep is just get a basic understanding of what our like natural sleep patterns are through gathering data. So this is from the National Sleep Foundation, as you can see. And so yeah, for just like a week, kind of understanding when you go to bed, what happened during the day, see recording like how easy you were able to fall asleep, if you had any substances like caffeine, how much, and then recording how many times you woke up during the night. And the rest of this chart is pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, just getting data to understand what patterns, and so you can kind of develop some like correlations and see what works best for you. Oh, you're on mute.
I see that. So how do we get back on track as if we're having trouble with like sleep? We can use some behaviors that promote sleep. So one thing is to stop like trying. You know, we talked about that paradox of trying really hard to fall asleep. So instead, approaching sleep with just allowing permission to maybe like to have like a more permission to feel our body the way we're feeling, to kind of allow ourselves to kind of naturally get in touch with maybe that sleepiness, rather than like I need to fall asleep or I have to fall asleep. Kind of trusting our kind of body to, we talked about kind of that homeostasis, where kind of our body will try to self-regulate and it will try to fall asleep. And so allowing ourselves to have a bit more permission to just kind of fall asleep. There's kind of this create a show about nothing. So this can be just kind of engaging in more kind of letting maybe our mind kind of wander, but not, not trying to fight it, or to kind of be more maybe mindful and just like non-judgmental, kind of letting it kind of go a little bit, letting our kind of mind do what it kind of does. You can also reassure yourself, because I think we talked about how anxiety can increase and maybe some alertness. So reassuring yourself about it. So it's you can and you will fall asleep, that your body is self-regulating. And so we talked about earlier how if you get a not so great night of sleep, your body's going to want to fall asleep and get better sleep the next night. So it's kind of like your body's going to try to take care of itself. So kind of compensate for sleep loss on its own. And then also just recognizing that waking throughout the night is actually pretty normal. So the average is about 12 times per night. So maybe there's this anxiety we notice like, oh, I'm waking up a lot, but in reality, kind of waking throughout the night is actually pretty common and expected. So there's also kind of the thoughts and emotions that we kind of talked about. We can kind of disconnect the conditioning. So break that conditioning piece. So in some ways, there are times where maybe we might go straight from like our normal work habits or the things that we were just doing straight into trying to fall asleep. And sometimes that means we're bringing a lot of our anxieties or our worries or kind of like our really alert and kind of aware and awake mind to the bedroom and to falling asleep. And so if we can create some time kind of to process the day, to kind of engage in more relaxing activities, this can also allow us to kind of de-stress before we're kind of getting into bed. And it kind of saves the bed for sleep related activities and intimacy only, rather than things like kind of laying there and trying to really force ourselves to fall asleep. So it is encouraged that like, if it's clear that the sleep isn't occurring, you can actually kind of get up and leave the bed, so that you're not kind of engaging in more of this wakefulness in the bed. This also is kind of important for other things too. Like I think we can do conditioning kind of behaviors in other ways as well, like setting boundaries around our workspace and not kind of engaging in things like Facebook or whatever, or other social media as we're working. So this kind of breaking the conditioning can be helpful in other areas as well. Consistency, so maintaining consistent sleep and kind of waking time. So the time that you're getting into bed and trying to fall asleep, and the time that you're kind of getting up can also help with that clock. So trying to create a routine, and you can also create routines around other things too to help that clock kind of be more accurate. So times when you're eating, exercising, socializing, so that your body gets a sense of like what the clock is set to right now. And so then obviously your body needs cues to wake up. So allowing our body to kind of to either engage in sleeping or engage in wakefulness. And so light, temperature, and activity can all have an impact on that. So whether that's having the light in the morning to help us wake up, versus kind of starting to reduce the light as we're kind of getting closer to falling asleep, having a cooler kind of environment for falling asleep, and some of those kind of things as well, helping us to relax, and activity. So can also be helpful for kind of burning off additional energy, kind of exhausting us, and helping us to engage with more that sleep drive that kind of builds up throughout the day. There's this kind of last piece that sometimes we might have impacts of that are on our sleep from like our dreams. Maybe it's harder to sleep if we're having kind of we're maybe having more recurrent bad dreams or kind of nightmares. So we can play out scenarios for recurrent bad dreams to alter the endings for maybe a more empowering or positive kind of ending. There is this caveat in here that kind of says like if there's trauma related to the experiences or memories, to consult a mental health provider as well before kind of attempting that.
Some things that led me slide. Okay, here we go. So yeah, there's some technologies out there that you may know of that help us with our sleep. Headspace is a pretty popular app that has a lot of mindfulness skills that focus on relaxation, but also sleep. Sometimes they have student rates, so at a cheaper cost. I believe last year at the beginning of the pandemic, they were even having like free subscriptions for a little bit. They also have free resources on their app. So there's probably tons of podcasts out there, but one of them is Sleep With Me, bedtime stories. And then there's cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So working with a therapist to kind of identify some of those like thought patterns and behavioral patterns that lead to insomnia. UHS, we have some relaxation activities. If you go to our like wellness page, you can, it's basically like, I think it's through Spotify, like you can listen to some similar things that you would hear on like Headspace, but we have that free of charge. And then just to reiterate many of the points we already said during this presentation, this is like the template for sleeping soundly. So having a consistent wake time, exposure to light, so you're triggering that body clock, activity during the day, so you're help triggering the sleep drive, consistent meals, back to the body clock, so making sure you're having those benchmarks throughout the day. Ceasing caffeine at least 4 hours before bedtime. Half-life of caffeine is 6 hours. So yeah, you want to like kind of time out your caffeine consumption so you're not interrupting the sleep drive. Avoid naps. Napping is kind of controversial because it's like fantastic to nap, but if you do feel the need to nap, like keep it pretty brief. And then cease productive behaviors 1 to 2 hours before bedtime. So kind of giving yourself like some space to kind of like ease into sleep instead of like going from like 100 to sleep. That rarely works out. So bring closure to the day. So prepare, so you can prepare for the next day, problem solve, process emotions, but you can do it in a way that doesn't trigger anxiety because that will like interfere with your sleep. But like if there's some way to like close out the day that feels relaxing and therapeutic, that's great. A few more tips, engage in relaxing activities. So sometimes people meditate prior to bed. There's bedtime yoga. You can probably find stuff on YouTube for other relaxing activities or just reading, some people do. Maintain a positive, neutral attitude about sleep. So like being kind to yourself. Like, so if you aren't just falling asleep right away, just say like, I will eventually fall asleep. Like just being kind to yourself because that pressure to sleep will like interfere with your sleep, as James mentioned earlier. Go to bed at bedtime. So once again, that consistency. If you're not sleepy after a period, leave the bed until sleepiness returns. So you're not associating your bed with other activities. Your bed is for sleeping and intimacy. Allow for natural waking during the night. We wake up several times during the night, so that's natural. Get up at wake time. Avoid the snooze button so you can have that consistency. You wake up at like 7 or whatever time and then repeat, like just keep doing that. So now we're going to talk about some services at UHS briefly. And so James and I work in the mental health department. This is just a small, it's just pretty comprehensive list of services we provide at UHS. So we have individual counseling, couples counseling, single sessions. Single sessions are just individual counseling, but more focused on like coping skills and strategies. We have group, our crisis line, which is just our phone number to our office, press option 9, always available regardless of time of day or day of the week. We have psychiatry. We have Let's Talk. Due to the pandemic, Let's Talk is now done through Zoom. So if you go to our website, you can see the different times, and sometimes our Let's Talk sessions are based on like identity or like major. So you can also see like if you're in engineering, there's a specific one for engineering. If you're a student of color, there's a specific Let's Talk that you can sign up for. We have behavioral health, which does a lot of things, but also if you're interested in like learning more about how to improve your sleep or working with someone, behavioral health would be a good option there. We also do a variety of assessments. We do care management. So if the services we have here aren't working for you, we can help you get connected to someone in the community that takes your insurance or is like affordable for you. So we can work with you on like getting the services that you do need if they're outside of UHS. And then, yeah, we consult with faculty and staff. We have our wellness program, which is similar to like our relaxation activities and stuff like that, and survivor services. So, and then a few other services. Some of these services aren't going on because of the pandemic, but we still have nutrition counseling. So if you're interested in working with nutritionists, yeah, we have that. We have program Let's Yoga, and we have virtual yoga, so that's still available. Silver Cloud is a tool, I think I mentioned earlier, cognitive behavioral therapy. Silver Cloud, it uses that technique of therapy, so understanding our thoughts, behaviors, and kind of developing ways to approach our mental health through accessing our thoughts, behaviors, and feelings and stuff like that. And then so how to get connected to us, you can webbook an access appointment. So I mentioned earlier that I'm an access specialist. So you can do an appointment that's about 20 to 30 minutes long on the phone with an access specialist, and we can get a brief history of like what's going on for you, things that have gone on in the past, how you're feeling right now, and then connect you to one of those services that I mentioned earlier. You probably know where we're located, but actually we're all in our homes throughout Madison. And then I think I kind of touched on this already. You can web book a access appointment. Brief consultation, description of your situation, and then we connect you to some service, either services at UHS, or we can help you get connected to someone in the community. And so that's it for our presentation. But as our title of our presentation indicates, so Go to Bleep to Sleep is a children's book. We have a reading of that by Samuel L. Jackson that we can share with you. I'm going to stop sharing for a second to switch my screen around. But just as a heads up, there is the word, the bleep word is used a lot through this book reading. So let me make sure I have this. No, sorry, I'm not tech savvy. Make sure I share the sound. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Samuel L. Jackson on Go the Fuck to Sleep.
I was anxious to do the audio read of this book because my agent has twins, and he gave me the book. I read it, and I fell out laughing. And I remember all those times when I did read to my daughter when she was that age. And everybody tells you reading stories will put kids to sleep, but it never works. It didn't in my house. Actually, if I picked her up and made up a story, it worked a lot better. But I did say go to fuck to sleep to her a lot. And I think at some point she would look at me when I would come in her room, and she would look at me and say, "Go to fuck to sleep, Daddy?" And I would say, "Yeah, go to fuck to sleep."
Audible Inc. presents Go the Fuck to Sleep. Written by Adam Mansbach. Narrated by Samuel L. Jackson.
The cats nestle close to their kittens. The lambs have laid down with the sheep. You're cozy and warm in your bed, my dear. Please go the fuck to sleep. The windows are dark in the town, child. The whales huddle down in the deep. I'll read you one very last book if you swear you'll go the fuck to sleep. The eagles who soar through the sky are at rest, and the creatures who crawl, run, and creep. I know you're not thirsty. That's bullshit. Stop lying. Lie the fuck down, my darling, and sleep. The wind whispers soft through the grass, hun. The field mice, they make not a peep. It's been 38 minutes already. Jesus Christ, what the fuck? Go to sleep. All the kids from daycare are in dreamland. The froggy has made his last leap. Hell no, you can't go to the bathroom. You know where you can go? The fuck to sleep. The owls fly forth from the treetops. Through the air they soar and they sweep. A hot crimson rage fills my heart, love. For real, shut the fuck up and sleep. The cubs and the lions are snoring, wrapped in a big, snuggly heap. How come you can do all this other great shit, but you can't lie the fuck down and sleep? The seeds slumber beneath the earth now, and the crops that the farmers will reap. No more questions. This interview's over. I've got 2 words for you, kid. Fucking sleep. The tiger reclines in the simmering jungle. The sparrow has silenced her cheep. Fuck your stuff, bear. I'm not getting you shit. Close your eyes, cut the crap, sleep. The flowers doze low in the meadows, and high on the mountains so steep. My life is a failure. I'm a shitty ass parent. Stop fucking with me, please, and sleep. The giant pangolins of Madagascar are snoozing as I lie here and openly weep. Sure, fine, whatever. I'll bring you some milk. Who the fuck cares? You're not gonna sleep. This room is all I can remember. The furniture, crappy and cheap. You win. You escape. You run down the hall. As I nod the fuck off and sleep. Bleary and dazed, I awaken to find your eyes shut. So I keep my fingers crossed tight as I tiptoe away and pray that you're fucking asleep. We're finally watching our movie. Popcorn's in the microwave. Beep. Oh shit, god damn it, you gotta be kidding! Come on, go the fuck back to sleep.
And yeah, and so that's our presentation. So we'll open up for questions.
Danielle, there was one question. There are times when I get exhausted in the middle of the day, and I know I won't be productive unless I take a nap first. How long should the average nap be?
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember. It should be pretty short, like 15 to 30 minutes max. Yeah, so pretty short. So you aren't dipping into that like deeper level of sleep. So it's just like just addressing like the immediate sleepiness, but not actually getting deeper into sleep. Anything to add, James, with that?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think 20 minutes or 15 to 30 minutes, right, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the only question I saw in the Q&A. Gonna give it one more second in case anyone has any last minute questions. Okay. Well then, thank you, Danielle and James, for sharing such valuable information about sleep, even though you told us to rethink naps, and y'all know naps are my favorite. And thank you to all the participants for attending. Please visit the Summit website at wellbeingsummit.wis.edu for other events throughout the day. You can join using the same Zoom link for all of our sessions. Our next session is called Am I Just Bad at This? How Procrastination Actually Works. And that one will start at 1:45. We hope you join us here. Thank you.
gonna say I'm seeing 2 open questions in the chat or in the Q&A, so I don't know if we want to try to answer those as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, are they already out or, okay. Yeah, we can try to get the questions.
Are we still able to answer those questions?
Answer a few.
Yeah,
of them.
which one do you want to? Yeah,
Oh,
which one do you want to go with first?
Yeah, we can just start with the first one. I've been taking a heavy sleep medication for a while now, and I know that if I stop taking it, I'll have a lot of trouble falling asleep. Is there a healthy way to ease out of taking it?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first reaction would be to speak to the provider that is prescribing that medication. I think that would be my first kind of go-to to just check in with them.
Mhm.
I don't know if you have other thoughts as well, Danielle.
Yeah, my immediate thought is to check in with the person prescribing, because a lot of sleep medications, there's a things going on with like possible side effects and dependency depending on the medication. So yeah, your provider will give you some guidance on phasing out. So another question, sorry, I'm trying to make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay, how true is having the saying that some people are just night owls and are rather productive at night? Will this affect the sleep cycle and productivity? I'm not quite sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, I've heard that saying of night owl, but yeah, I don't, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if you have any better thoughts, James.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure I have a good answer for this. I do wonder if, like, if we kind of look at our current behaviors around sleep to see if, like, are you feeling just more energized later in the day? Because that's kind of how the behaviors are leading to. Like, is it, like, I'm thinking of things like, do you have like blind curtains where like it's just dark in your room and then your wake time is later? So then maybe the sleep drive is just, you know, um, hitting a point later on in the day. So it might just be looking at some of those behaviors. I'm not sure if I have an exact answer about whether there's a specific difference between kind of people who are more night owls versus kind of more morning people. But
Yeah, I've heard of people having like very different sleep schedules that just kind of work for them over time. Like some people take a bunch of little naps. Some people will, stay up late. And so it's really just about the individual and what works best. Sometimes like the day clock competes with our like body clock and what's going on there. So so, so sometimes I get sleepy right before bed, but if I don't go to sleep during that time and I miss my window, how can I get to sleep afterwards?
yeah, I guess one of my thoughts is I'm wondering what kind of activities you're engaging in after you decide like, okay, I can't fall asleep. Wondering if those activities might be engaging kind of that awareness and arousal kind of process rather than engaging more of that sleep drive process. So wondering if there are different activities that might be able to increase relaxation, maybe disconnect from like kind of some of those anxious worries or things that maybe might be going on for you. I don't know if you have other thoughts, Danielle.
No, I don't really have any additional thoughts. And then, the following question is, it's basically the same.
It's the same one.
Reading through, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions? All right then. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. Oh,
Okay.
another question in the chat. Oh yeah. Thank you for staying after to answer questions. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, of course.
Well, have a good afternoon, everyone.